Over several consecutive nights, the imposing dark-coated German Shepherd refused to leave the newborn's room. Disregarding every command from his owners and even rejecting treats, the dog remained motionless beside the crib, as if keeping a silent vigil. At first, the parents found this behavior unusual but harmless. However, on one quiet early morning, something stirred the animal, causing him to suddenly stand up, muscles tensed and eyes fixed on the window. It wasn't until they reviewed the baby's monitor footage that they understood what was really happening, and in a state of panic, they immediately called the police. Matthew and Emily always checked on their daughter's room before going to sleep, but that night something made them pause in the hallway. There, beside the crib, lay Rex, the robust 4-year-old German Shepherd they had recently adopted, positioned in a protective stance. This was unusual, for normally Rex would stay with them in the living room until the little one had fallen asleep, then settle in his own bed in the corner of the sofa. But that night, he had entered the baby's room and, with unwavering determination, refused to leave, lying right next to the crib. His eyes remained locked on the sleeping infant, and his slow, steady breathing suggested he was on high alert. Matthew frowned and softly called to him, "Come on, buddy, it's time for your bed." Receiving no response, Emily tried another tactic by offering one of his favorite treats, but Rex didn't even blink. When Matthew gently tried to pull him by the leash, the dog stiffened and resisted without making a sound. They exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of what to do, and after a few minutes of discussion, they decided to let the matter rest, thinking it might just be a fleeting protective instinct. Before turning off the light, Emily cast one last look at the scene, Rex motionless by the crib, and the baby sleeping deeply, a sight that, at first glance, even seemed endearing. Little did they know that this simple decision would trigger events far greater than they could have imagined. In the following nights, Rex's behavior remained unchanged. Every time Matthew and Emily placed their daughter in the crib, he would immediately lie down beside her, as if that had become his new favorite spot. After the first night, the couple stopped worrying and, in fact, began to appreciate the bond forming between their daughter and the dog. Emily watched with affection as the connection deepened, always having dreamed of a complete family where every member had their place. Seeing Rex and their daughter together reminded her of all they had endured to reach this moment. After all, Matthew and Emily had longed to be parents and had struggled for months without success, convinced that the path to parenthood would be arduous. When hope seemed to be fading, Emily was heartbroken, and Matthew, determined to see his wife smile again, set out to fill the void in their lives. During a visit to an animal shelter, he was captivated by Rex, the vigorous dark-coated German Shepherd who stood out among the others. There was something in his piercing gaze that convinced him to adopt without hesitation. Soon after, the adoption papers were signed, and Rex became part of the family, bringing with him the promise of a new beginning. The effect was immediate. The moment Emily saw him, she fell in love with the energy and affection he radiated, awakening in her a deep desire to care for and nurture, feelings that had long lain dormant. Though Rex was not the baby she had always envisioned, he quickly became an essential member of the family. In the first few months, the dog and the baby were inseparable. Rex followed her everywhere in the house, slept at her feet, and even lounged on the sofa during family movie nights. Over time, their bond grew stronger, and Rex became a refuge for Emily's frustrations and sorrows, which filled Matthew with immense gratitude as he watched his wife smile again. Yet, Emily's longing for a child never faded. On the contrary, it grew more intense with each passing year. After nearly 5 years of marriage without conceiving, the couple was beginning to lose faith. Then, when it seemed that things could not get any worse, something unexpected happened. Rex, who had always been their greatest source of joy and comfort, began to change. The dog grew quieter, his appetite diminished, and his gaze turned distant. Alarmed, Matthew and Emily rushed him to the veterinarian, fearful of what might be wrong. However, nothing could have prepared them for the devastating news. Rex had been diagnosed with cancer. The diagnosis hit them like a raging storm, shattering the fragile equilibrium they had worked so hard to build. It seemed that whenever life began to settle, adversity would arise. First the struggle to have a child, and now an illness threatening the only creature that had brought them comfort and joy. It took them some time to come to terms with that harsh reality. Once the initial shock subsided, however, the couple made a resolute decision. They would not give up on Rex. He was part of the family, and he deserved every effort to recover. They embarked on a long journey of treatments, with frequent visits to the veterinary clinic and an intense routine of care. Each day was a battle, and every small improvement was a cause for celebration. After weeks of hard fighting, Rex beat the illness, and the joy Matthew and Emily felt was indescribable, as if they had reclaimed a lost piece of their lives. Yet this victory came at a cost. Rex never again regained his powerful, energetic bark. The robust sounds he once made were replaced by soft, hoarse grunts, as the cancer had damaged his larynx and rendered him unable to vocalize as before. Emily felt a pang in her heart upon hearing this, but ultimately, what mattered most was that Rex remained by their side. In an effort to comfort her, Matthew murmured, "Maybe it's just another reminder of everything we've been through together. He's here, and that's what counts." Emily nodded, holding his hand as she absorbed his words. Still, Rex's recovery was not only physical, something within him had changed. He no longer exuded the vibrant energy of his former self and sometimes withdrew, his gaze empty and his body listless. The veterinarian assured them that this phase would pass with time, yet the months dragged on and Rex continued to appear subdued. Just when hope was beginning to wane, a surprising turn of events occurred. Emily discovered she was pregnant. The news came as a shock, bringing with it a wave of happiness that had long been absent after years of fruitless attempts. When they least expected it, life had granted them a baby. Yet the greatest surprise was Rex's reaction. The once disheartened and distant dog suddenly sprang back to life. His instincts seemed to pick up on the change even before Matthew and Emily could fully comprehend it. Rex began to follow Emily around the house, his tail wagging with renewed enthusiasm, as if he now had a new reason to protect those he loved dearly. As Emily's pregnancy progressed, Rex's presence by her side became constant. It was as if he sensed, before she even understood, that a new life was growing within her and needed guarding. Emily lovingly envisioned a future where Rex and her baby would be inseparable, eagerly anticipating the day when she could witness their bond flourishing. That long-awaited day finally arrived, and the baby was born. Rex's transformation was immediate and astonishing. His behavior changed radically, just as Emily had predicted. The dog, who had once seemed lost in his own thoughts, had found a new purpose. He quickly became attached to the newborn, following her every move. If the baby slept, Rex lay next to the crib. If she cried, he perked up his ears as if ready to defend her from any unseen threat. With each passing day, their bond grew stronger, and Matthew and Emily marveled at the pure, sincere connection between them. At first, the couple dismissed Rex's behavior as a passing phase, perhaps simply a manifestation of curiosity or a fleeting trend. But as the weeks went by, it became evident that Rex was not merely protecting the child. He seemed incapable of leaving her side. Even when Matthew and Emily were in the same room, Rex stayed fixed by the crib, and if he ever moved away for any reason, he would promptly return, as if checking that everything was all right. Initially, this behavior seemed endearing until one afternoon when Emily noticed something that made her question everything. After feeding the baby, Emily placed her on a soft blanket in the living room and went to the kitchen to finish some tasks. As usual, Rex took his position by the baby's room. Although Emily was accustomed to this sight, when she returned to the living room, her heart raced. Rex was not merely lying beside the crib. His large body was positioned in such a way that it enveloped the child, with his head resting near her and his slow, deep breathing creating a soothing rhythm. As the baby idly moved her tiny fingers, the imposing presence of the dog unsettled Emily. What had once seemed like genuine affection now struck her as bordering on obsession. It wasn't just Rex's size that worried her, but the intensity of his behavior. She feared that, even unintentionally, he might injure her fragile little body. A shiver ran down her spine, and her maternal instincts blared an alarm. Something was not right. For the first time, she wondered if Rex's devotion was going too far. That night, when Matthew returned from work, Emily expressed her concerns, but he dismissed them, insisting that Rex was merely fulfilling his natural role as protector and that perhaps she was overreacting because of her maternal sensitivity. "He's always been a good dog, Emily. Maybe you're just seeing dangers that aren't there," he tried to reassure her, though without any solid proof. Still, Emily couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something in Rex had changed. Despite not being able to completely prevent the dog from interacting with the baby, Emily began to take precautions. During the day, she stayed close to her daughter at all times, and at night she moved Rex to their own room. If he wanted to watch over the baby, he would have to do so from a distance. Initially, this strategy seemed to work. Rex started behaving more like his old self, less obsessive and less insistent. Gradually, Emily's anxiety eased, replaced by reason, and her trust in Rex was restored. One night, as she watched the dog lying peacefully on the rug while she slept, Emily felt a weight on her chest, a pang of regret for perhaps having been too strict with him. After all, this was not exactly what she had always envisioned. an unbreakable bond between Rex and her daughter. Realizing her reaction might have been excessive, she decided to let him resume playing freely with the baby. A few weeks later, the crib was returned to the baby's room, and slowly, the family's routine returned to normal. For a while, everything seemed fine, but then Rex began to revert to his old behavior. Although less intense, he still refused to leave the baby's room at night. Emily tried to ignore it, simply lying down and watching her daughter sleep without any further signs of obsessive behavior. Perhaps it was just a habit. But one night, an incident changed everything. Noticing that Emily still appeared visibly uneasy, Matthew decided to intervene. He walked over to Rex and grabbed his leash to lead him out of the room when, unexpectedly, the dog emitted a low, menacing growl. His teeth bared and his posture became rigid. Matthew froze. He had never seen Rex act like that in all these years. The tension in the room was nearly unbearable. Emily's heart pounded as she realized what was happening, and driven by instinct, she refused to let the baby remain in that room any longer. With firm steps, she entered the room, picked up the baby, and quickly left. To her surprise, Rex did not follow. He merely watched, his eyes tracking every movement as if analyzing the situation. Emily left with her heart racing, caught between relief and confusion over Rex's unexpected behavior. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Matthew and Emily discussed the increasingly worrisome behavior. What had begun as a seemingly protective attachment now appeared to be growing more intense and potentially dangerous. After a serious conversation, they agreed that the following morning they would take Rex to a specialist in animal behavior to understand what was happening before something even worse occurred. The next morning, Emily awoke feeling the weight of their decision. The day promised to be long and full of uncertainties. Before leaving the room, she considered checking if Rex was still by the crib, but hesitated, the memory of his growl from the previous night still vivid. Instead, she opted for a safer approach. She grabbed the baby monitor and checked the live feed. The image showed Rex still lying in the same spot, his head resting on his paws, and Emily let out a sigh of relief. Perhaps they were overreacting. Maybe Rex was simply demonstrating his protective instinct in his own way. But before turning off the monitor, an inexplicable feeling compelled her to review previous recordings. It had been a while since she had looked through the monitor's history, but suddenly she felt an urgent need to see what had transpired over the past few nights. The video began to play, and after a few seemingly normal seconds, something made Emily's heart race and a chill ran through her veins. Without delay, she called Matthew, and together they watched the footage intently. The recordings revealed a disturbing pattern. Every night at the same time, Rex would become tense, lifting his head abruptly, ears pointed forward, and then he would start growling continuously, always directed toward the window. Initially, the sound was soft, merely a warning, but as the nights passed, its intensity increased. Rex bared his teeth, his body stiffened, and sometimes he would even rise as if ready to attack. It was as though the dog sensed something outside, something his instincts recognized as an imminent threat. A shiver ran down Emily's spine as she realized that Rex wasn't just being overprotective, he was actively trying to safeguard her daughter from a real danger. Matthew then picked up the phone and called the police. At that moment, taking Rex to the specialist was no longer their primary concern. It was urgent to understand what was happening around the house. With the assistance of the officers, they reviewed all the footage from the exterior cameras, focusing on the moments when Rex went into alert mode. What they saw made their blood run cold. On the baby's room monitor, a shadow was seen moving slowly outside the window. Emily gasped, covering her mouth in disbelief. Someone was there, watching her daughter sleep. Although the image wasn't clear enough to reveal a face, it unmistakably showed a figure lurking by the glass. As if that weren't terrifying enough, another discovery worsened the situation. Recordings from the doorbell camera showed a man wandering in the backyard on several nights. He wasn't merely walking around. He approached the windows, scrutinized the house, and remained motionless for long stretches as if studying every detail. Emily's heart raced as she wondered who this man was and why he was so fixated on their home. The police launched an immediate investigation, and upon recognizing a pattern, they advised Matthew and Emily to take extra precautions. Although they did not know the man's identity or his intentions, it was clear he posed a real threat. That same day, they packed a few bags and moved to a relative's home, desperate to escape the constant feeling of being watched. Emily knew she wouldn't be able to sleep until they had some answers. A week later, the phone rang again. It was the police. The officer's voice on the other end brought a momentary relief. The man seen in the footage had been identified and arrested. However, The worst part of the news was yet to come. During the investigation, it emerged that he wasn't just a random drifter roaming the neighborhood. He was connected to a series of child abductions in several cities. His method was always the same: observe, study the family's routine, and wait for the perfect moment to strike. Emily felt a chill run down her spine as she realized they had been dangerously close to an unimaginable disaster. If not for Rex, their daughter might have been taken. Then everything became clear. Rex wasn't acting out of mere possessiveness or unwarranted obsession. He had always known something was wrong, but unable to bark properly because of his illness. He found his only way to alert them was to stay by the baby's side every night, protecting her with his life. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she realized that she had spent so much time worrying about Rex's unusual behavior without understanding that he was, in fact, trying to save her daughter. The guilt weighed heavily on her heart, and she regretted not having trusted him from the start. If it hadn't been for Rex, who knew what might have happened? Matthew and Emily were overwhelmed by a mixture of shock, relief, and gratitude. Now everything made sense. Rex wasn't refusing to leave the baby's room simply out of attachment or obsession. He was truly safeguarding his daughter from a real threat, even though he couldn't alert them with his bark. Night after night, he remained steadfast by her side, ensuring that no one came near. Matthew knelt beside Rex, stroking his coat with a trembling voice as he murmured, "You saved us." Emily gently caressed the dog's muzzle, tears streaming down her cheeks as she whispered, "I doubted you." Rex simply closed his eyes, as if understanding every word. After the arrest of the abductor, the family made the difficult but necessary decision to relocate to another city. The fear they had experienced in recent weeks was too overwhelming to ignore, and Matthew and Emily knew they would never again feel safe or sleep peacefully in their old home. A fresh start in a secure environment was the best choice for everyone. Once they finally settled into their new house, they noticed something peculiar. Rex was different. In their old home, he had been constantly on alert, always vigilant. Now, he seemed calmer and more relaxed. Emily took this as a sign that Rex no longer felt the need to be on guard, because at last, they were safe. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe a sigh of relief. Over time, their little girl grew up with her devoted guardian by her side, and Emily smiled every day as she watched Rex playing with her daughter in the yard, running together as if they were part of the same world. She felt daily gratitude for trusting her instincts and reviewing those recordings that morning, for discovering the danger in time, and above all, for having Rex in their family. Her loyal dog had not only saved her daughter, but had also prevented other parents from experiencing the pain of losing a child. In the end, Rex proved to be much more than just a pet. He was a true hero.